Okay, just take a few moments to settle in, find a comfortable posture for yourself. So, with a background, if you don't have a background in Tai Chi, you'll have a sense of what we're aiming for. But in the first instance, just simply sitting for a moment, try and have your feet down, and get a sense of arriving. So, I think we get into a session, whether online or in person, always requires effort, always requires making arrangements and getting there and timing and so on and so forth. You can just sort of let that take a back seat now, and along with that, other kind of extraneous, as we might call them, thoughts. And there can be many of those for all sorts of reasons. But we just want to get a sense of actually kind of being here with this as our primary focus. Those other things will undoubtedly sort of intrude. But one of the things that we learn in Tai Chi is to not be led around by those thoughts. We're here for a particular purpose with a particular intention. So further in that, really, just rubbing your hands together and tapping over your face with the pads of your fingers. Like a light but rapid movement, as always. And then over your head and neck, down to one shoulder. And this is like everything that we do in Tai Chi, a mind-body exercise. We get the physical warm-up, change the other side, shoulder first, and then your arm. So yes, we get the physical warm-up, and if you're familiar with this, you get a sense of the resonance in the body. Change now to the upper part of the chest. But also, again, it furthers this process of bringing your attention in. Right on your belly. And the upper part of the chest. Now, sit back in your chair and have your feet out like you're sitting in a deck chair. And just allowing your weight to drop down. And this is one of the key principles in Tai Chi, that we want our weight to drop. We don't want to carry our weight in our upper part of our body if we're upright, in our chest. If we're sitting back like this, we want to allow gravity to pull our weight downwards. In this instance, principally into the chair, of course. That helps to release tightness and stiffness in the front of our body. That can have a direct impact on things like breathing and circulation, of course. And when we come to the upright positions, then that also helps to stabilize this rooting down, as we call it, helps to stabilize our posture. And it also, again, gives a primary focus for our attention, for our thoughts, that we try and follow that movement downwards. So we ground ourselves, if you like, both physically and mentally. And one of the ways that we can sort of begin to sense an outcome from this is that both in our body, as the tightness in our body releases, and in our minds, as the sort of business of our thoughts begins to quieten and to settle, we just get a sense of more space, both mind and body. And it's within that space that the movement will take place. So now coming back up to the upright position, paying a little bit more attention to our posture. We want to maintain the root. So we want to posture in line with the pull of gravity. If I'm sitting here leaning to one side, for instance, and I just let gravity work through my body, I'll call that chair. So I want to align myself with the chair. I want to feel that my body is in alignment with itself, and ideally forwards in the chair and tilting forward slightly to feel about a third of my weight in my feet. And between my feet and my hips, we have this foundation, this physical foundation, the root for the rest of the practice. So this becomes a constant background feature for us. And it, we can help, for instance, releasing tightness and stiffness in our neck and in our shoulders. So with that in the background, just beginning to turn your head. Having an awareness of the space within which we can move freely. That might be quite small. Probably will be in our neck. It's important that we don't strain, that we don't sort of try and really get into conflict with the boundaries of the movement, but rather let the quality of the movement, very fluid sense of movement that develops, kind of erodes those boundaries. So gradually our range of movement will increase to a degree. Hands in front of the shoulders. Trying to move in such a way that doesn't build up a tightness within the body. So thinking about that flow of the movement and letting that, in a way, take a lead. So I mentioned there's a sort of background awareness, a background intention to have that rooting down, that foundation. Another one that would sit alongside that is an intention to move with this fluidity. And then going forwards. When we can start to build that, we can also start to notice that, you know, as I turn my shoulders and my elbows rotate, I can also feel a movement within the body elsewhere, principally at this point in chest and upper back. So that release of tightness allows those connections to build. They're not interrupted by a sort of tightness across the body or something like that. Your hands drop down and out slightly, and then just rotating your arms on your shoulders. And again, maybe with an awareness of what's happening in your chest, your upper back, your sides. So we begin to get a sense of our bodies moving, not as separate parts, but as one unit. As I said, this is another outcome from that release of tightness. We effectively begin to allow our body to move in a very natural way, in a very connected way. And that's made possible by the fact that those connections aren't blocked by tension and tightness. And then raising your arms as though you're winding up cotton thread. And back the other way. Your hands rest. Now bring your attention to the middle part of your body, hips, pelvis, lower back, buttocks, and tilting forward slightly, feeling more of your weight go into your legs, and then using your feet, pushing down through your feet, push yourself back. As you go forward, your hips dropping back. So not only is there a push from your feet, but a bit of a pull from your hips. The combination enables movement where we can come up nice and smoothly without having to stiffen up, without having to tighten up in shoulders and upper back and so on and so forth. Or at least in theory, it can take a while to build that. Beginning to appreciate that the center of the body is of crucial importance. It's this part of our body that we want to feel is dropping down into that foundation, into the root. It's this part of the body that actually is the focus for all other parts of the body in the way that the hub of a wheel would be the focus for the spokes of the wheel. So when we move in the center of the body, that feeling of connection I was talking about has the potential to spread through the whole. So then if we turn here, if I turn in this direction, I change the direction of the movement. I get more of my weight going into this leg. The whole of my torso has turned. And we turn the other way. And then rolling the pelvis around, drawing head and shoulders around in a nice smooth circle. Much of the power, much of the energy for movement is taken from this dynamic of our weight sinking down and the counter movement, the resilience of our body, particularly legs and hips, to that movement downwards. Almost as though you were doing some trampoline, that the movement downwards produces the upward movement. And that upward movement is guided, directed through the center of the body. Go back the other way. It's not the whole story, but it's a principal part of it. So you could think of that sinking down as being like if you drive a car or ride a bike, you push down on the pedals, push down on the accelerator to get the power to move. And then we steer it through the handlebars, through the steering wheel. We direct it to where we want it to go. So another really important point of focus is this center part. Coming back to the original position, then just extending your foot, put your heel down, lower your toes, gently push the foot into the floor. Back. Call this planting the foot. And it's just like you might push, if you plant a seedling, like you might just push gently around the earth to make sure it was properly firm, but not a hard push. We just really register that contact with the ground as we do that. And then on the other side. So as we get more experience in these arts, we notice other forms of movement going on, other patterns of movement beyond just that downward and upward. But the downward and upward is a constant. We begin to associate an awareness of the center of the body and its tendency to drop down into the ground with a sense of stillness, of a kind of observation point, somewhere we can look out from and observe these dynamic qualities going on through the body. So we have a combination of stillness and movement, the two very much in harmony with each other. So now let your hands drop down again. Once again, turn the palms of your hands forwards, combining two of the earlier movements, weight moving forwards and your arms rotating. Bird folds it. Your arms are hanging directly from your shoulders at this point. So the main movement is that transfer of your weight from hips to feet and back again, complemented by this rotation that means that our hand just travels through a distinct curve. This time, when you come forwards, your hands facing backwards. And stay that way. Now they're just swinging from the shoulders. This is called fisherman casting. And notice here, for most of the time, my hands are behind my shoulder. They only swing past when I settle into the hips, and likewise going forwards. Another very common, pretty much universal image in Tai Chi is to imagine that we're moving through water. And as our minds settle more fully into our bodies, we bring with that a sense of intentionality to the movement. We begin to appreciate how those intentions can be stimulated by things like imagery, memory, and the impact that they have on our bodies. So, when we move in water, we move in a particular way, less tight, less stiff, but also there's a resistance there that we need to find a way to move through. One noted teacher once described Tai Chi as swimming on dry land. So the image of moving through water enhances both the flow of the movement and the release of tightness in our bodies, but also a conditioning of body and energy. We begin to realize that we can direct, shape that movement that comes initially from the sinking down, the rooting down, a variety of different shapes and patterns, both the external patterns that you see me doing, but also the very subtle changes and movements within our body, particularly within the upper body. And then imagine a ball behind your arms, and as you come back, your arms are just drawing the ball in towards you. Stiffen up in your shoulders. It's like pulling your arms to begin with. So the ball were quite heavy. Notice as you go forwards here, as you start to come back, there's a slight extension in your back that begins to contract as you come back. So that's one of those internal patterns that I was talking about. This time, as your hands come up, turn them palm in, draw your elbows apart. Feel how that expands your chest, and then going forwards, chest contracts, drawing your arms in. Pigeon spreads its wings. Behind the chest and the upper part of your back, where your shoulder blades sit, we also have an expansion and contraction, the mirror image of the expansion and contraction in our chest. So again, we have forward and backward movement. We have the sinking down and the push up, but we also have these very subtle changes building in the upper body. Like a wave going from hips to legs, legs to hips, through the upper body. One more of these. And then as you sit back, Bring your hands straight and elbows still go out a little bit. This is called pushing wave. So now the wave, as you push forwards, pushes your arm forwards, pushes your elbow forwards, and because of the shape of the arm, the hands will just swerve upwards. I'm not trying to lift my arms, just keeping the shape there without straining. Giving you a slightly stronger feeling. You imagine that you're pushing against something. Imagine you're pushing under something like a supermarket trolley, something like that. Again, noticing how our bodies respond to intentions, one kind or another. And then, hands a little bit lower down, fist your hands, push forwards, rotating your arms, punch with both fists. Movement follows up an underlying pattern, extension out from the ground and your center, and a contraction back in. Yang to yin, you like to use those terms. So again, each movement has very common ground. There's always that sense of what we would call yielding to the pull of gravity for the downward movement. There's always that sense of the upward movement, the response to that pull of gravity. There's always this pattern of yin yang, of extension and contraction. And in the case of the exercises that we've done, always a transfer of our weight from one part of our body to another, mostly from hips to feet in the seated exercise. And then open your fingers and wind down. The rooting down and the resultant upward movement, but the rooting down in particular is one of the key elements to help us to achieve a sense of stability. It won't be as obvious in the chair, but of course it's crucially important when we come to standing. Essentially, lower our center of gravity, the more stable we are. The way our weight distributes through our body, the way that distribution moves our body is another key element in our general mobility. So these are principles that, particularly when we bring them to the standing, are key benefits to take away with us. But even in the seated, you begin to establish the awareness of the significance of these things in the chair. Now, holding your hands palm down, turn, tilt forwards and let that movement push your hands forwards. Turn again, bringing your hands across to the other side, sit back, come back to the center. And then reverse that, turn, go in the other direction, forward. This is called polishing the table. So drawing the hands around in a nice smooth circle. Feeling the connection from hips to shoulders, down through your arms to your hands. It's a very subtle connection. I'm going to stand up so you can see the standing version of this. Perhaps appreciate more how our hips are involved. Notice how here I'll push my hips back. I swing them across. I let my hips drop back, bringing me to the upright, and I turn to the front. And I'll reverse that. Back and round and back up. Now, obviously, in the chair, our hips don't have the same degree of movement. They don't slide around the chair, but they're still very much a part of the movement. So this is a very subtle awareness. And if you can be aware of some of these factors in the subtlety of the chair-based exercises, when you come to standing, it'll be a lot clearer to you. You'll already have established a key link in developing these movements, which is simple awareness of the movements. One more in each direction. And let's come back to the seated position. So I've already described that movement as like a wave going from hips to the upper body, to the legs, feet, and then back again. That's one way we could think of this. Could also think in terms of your hips push you forwards, your feet push you back, whichever way suits you best. The next series of exercises, these are much more vertical. And so rather than alternating between a push or a wave originating from the hips, a push or a wave originating from the feet, we use both at the same time, so that the wave travels forwards from the hips, back from the feet, and when two waves meet, you get an upward move. So we're still engaging, or trying to engage feet, hips. There's still a subtle dimension of our weight involved in this, but the upper body doesn't really move forwards and backwards from this. And just bring your hands as though you're cradling the ball. So feeling that movement up from feet and hips, up through your back, like a wave coming straight up this time. Turn your hands over as though the ball were beneath your arms and press it down. If you imagine doing this in water, you have to find a way to apply a certain amount of soft strength. Press the ball down. So by soft strength, not a strained, stiff movement, but again, the sort of movement you might expect to make if you were in water playing with a ball and wanted to submerge the ball. So all this is happening really through the whole of the body. So by the time that sense of movement, that sense of energy reaches our arms and our hands, there's more than enough there to move our arms. So we shouldn't need to stiffen up or to strain in shoulders or elbows, wrists and fingers. And this allows the flow of the movement. And that helps to produce this very calming, harmonious quality in body and mind. Now, turning your hands out. And this is the movement, the wild goose, with the image of the bird flying. So our arms express the movement that builds through the rest of the body. And again, one of the sort of most important outcomes we want to get from this, especially for the sake of our well-being, both mental and physical, is this harmonious flowing movement. We have three elements coming together here. We have obviously the mechanics of the movement and the structure, so our bodies. We have that awareness and intentionality, and we have the movement, the energy itself. These are the three treasures that we look to to harmonize in practice. Guiding through the center of the body, through our intentionality, the movement, the flow of the energy in particular shapes to particular parts of the body, perhaps. Now, easing forwards, just to allow your arms to drop in front of your knees, settle back and push up. This is part in the cloud with this lovely, gentle, expansive quality, an opening quality, like the sun coming out from behind a bank of clouds. Excuse me. So part in the clouds. One more time. Stay upright, let your hands drop down, feel your shoulders drop, feel your weight dropping down, and then with an awareness of that push up, but really on one side of your body, one arm being pushed up, extending through that side of your body. Wind your arm around and down. It's called dragon plucks the stars from the sky. So you're going to pluck something off a tree. Change sides. Don't hurry the change over. Now imagine you're what we might call our mind's eye as being like a camera. See, when we see a documentary, perhaps of a landscape or wildlife documentary, the camera focuses on one thing, say, for instance, this arm, this side of the body, and then it slowly pans across through the center to the opposite side, and then we do the same thing. So that intentionality and also provide a bit of discrimination. Where do we want the movement to work? Which part of the body, which sort of action do we want to take? One more time. And then bring both hands up and pressing up, feeling your back lengthen. And contracting back down, bringing your hands back down in front of the center, and then pushing out, pushing in two directions. So that intentionality, as we get more experienced in this, has the capacity to help us to guide the movement to particular parts of the body. And in the end, what we may be able to do is say, suppose we've got a tight shoulder. We don't quite feel the flow of the movement there. Through imagination, through memory, through intention, guided by memory, imagination, awareness, so on, we could encourage the flow of energy that area, encourage a releasing, loosening in that area, remembering perhaps a sense of spaciousness that we can experience, not all the way through our body, in certain parts of the body. And imagining that occurring in that area of tightness. One more round. Bend one foot. Rest on the heel, easing forwards, scooping the sea, and look at the sky. Let your hips drop back, your shoulders following, your arms following your shoulders, opening up in the front of your body, and then gently forwards. With your back extended. Certain movements will certainly draw our attention to certain patterns within the body, certain parts of the body. So again, we can also learn which exercises might be best to help that tight shoulder. This time, rolling your hands into a hollow fist again. And pause, this time directing your arms upwards. This is grasping the tiger's ears. Names of the movements can sometimes convey a quality. I always think of this one as being quite a bold movement, as you might expect if you're grasping hold of the tiger's ears. And that long feeling in the back, there's a real kind of resilience, a real strength that starts to come through with this. Changing over. And then again, change into grasping tiger's ears. One more time. Yeah. Moving your weight forwards and backwards, we have the capacity to divide our intention, to have more than one thing going on with that sense of deliberate, conscious intention. You have the sinking down, push up, you have the forwards and backwards movement. Now, when you go into your backward, turn to your left, and that move your hand out. See where my hand is going forwards towards the left leg, sweep across towards the right, drawing your hand around, coming back to the center. And then go back the other way. So very similar to the exercise polishing the table, but really just with one hand, and perhaps with a bit more attention to how, when we turn in the center, we have a strong effect on the hand. Try that with the other hand. Turning out. And then in. If there was strong resistance to the movement, it wouldn't be just your arm that had to overcome that resistance. The turning in your center, the lengthening, the contraction in your back, the movement of your weight would all have a role to play, a major role to play in this in terms of the movement of the weight. So again, we start to get a sense for what we call internal strength. But now, this time, raise your left hand again as you go around. Let that move the left hand out and then reverse in So now an alternating expansion and contraction here, the right side of your body, including your arm, expanding, and then it contracts, and as it contracts, the left side expands. This is called stirring the beans. Sorry, it's not polishing the table. So again, with more experience, we learn that we're able to take a great deal of control over what happens in our body through this process of intentionality. One more on each side. And then I've seen it argued that everything that we do is preluded by some form of intention. Whether that's true or not is hard to say, I think, but certainly much of what we do is stimulated by unconscious intentionality. We often find ourselves sort of standing in a room and thought, why did I come in here? Something drove you to go in there. And that intentionality can be guided by lots of different things. Use of imagery is very important in Tai Chi, and we can see very clearly how our bodies respond to imagery. If I were to say to you, imagine you're walking past a billboard and it has a picture of a chocolate bar that you really like on it. If you were walking past the billboard, you could probably feel your mouth salivating. You might want to, oh, I'll pop into the shop and buy one. But even as you sit here, you may find, oh yeah, you can always taste the chocolate sometimes if it's the right sort of image. These are small changes within the body, but the small changes build up into bigger changes. So a significant part of what we're doing in Tai Chi is with awareness. We're taking ownership of that intentionality. We're guiding the intentionality to work in our favor rather than to drive us to buy yet another chocolate bar. Now, once again, rubbing your hands together and tapping over your face. And over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. The other side. And the upper part of your chest. Your belly. And your legs. Now push your heels up. If you get the muscles of your legs working a bit more freely. And circling them. And up. Okay, so standing. If you want to stay seated, that's fine, but if you can bring these movements and these ideas into the standing, that's useful. So we want a posture that allows for those intentions to work freely without restriction. And its primary intention is to allow our center of gravity to drop. So again, if I'm standing my feet too close together and I drop my center of gravity, I'm probably going to fall over if I'm leaning forwards or backwards or sideways. So we need to be aware of our posture, of the alignment of our posture once our feet directly below our hips, and just allowing gravity to pull your hips down. So your knees will bend a little bit, but don't do that too much. And then feel the push up, the body expanding and push out. We want that to set into a nice, steady, soothing rhythm. Then the push up from the hips to our shoulders, hence to our arms, and this time bringing your hands around for the standing version of rooting down. Same thing, pushing the ball up, turning your hands over, drop the hips, and sinking down. Now turn your hands out and go into the standing version of the wild goose. And then releasing in your hips, sinking down. Your hands drop, crossing over, and parting the clouds. So doing these three movements in a little sequence, observing the changes in the upper part of your body from one movement to another, until that information again becomes very embodied and can begin to guide our intentionality, and that will guide the movements. So, for instance, as we make the change to rooting down, bringing our hands underneath, you may notice that there's an expansion and contraction quite significant in our belly and our lower back. As we start the wild goose, we feel the same thing, but it seems to spread up towards the solar plexus. And then belly and solar plexus, and finally up into the upper part of our chest. So we have this movement of expansion and contraction, contributing to the energy, the movement that reaches our arms. And that's just one example. There are others that are often incredibly subtle. So another intention here is to keep a part of our attention, part of our thoughts, resting in that awareness of the center of our body, and there down into the ground. It's able to just rest there, stillness, and from that point of stillness to observe. There's a part of us not caught up in that movement. One more time. Just recognizing how these three treasures of body, mind, and energy influence and support each other. This is not mind over matter. This is about what happens when these three elements come together as one. We're not forcing the body to do something that goes against its natural structures, natural patterns of movement. Shake out. It's like if you want to chop up a piece of wood, if you know how the grain and it works in the wood, you can cut with the grain, and it's that much more efficient. We try and cut against the grain, it's a lot harder work. We're not making the wood float up in the air or do something that wood doesn't naturally do, but we're using that awareness to guide the physical action in what you could argue is the most economic way. Now, changing the stance, turn one foot out, step a little bit forward with the other foot. So you're standing on the corners of a square. And now beginning the weight transfer again, this time very much from foot to foot. Giving yourself a moment to settle into each foot, feeling that rising push, directing it into your back foot. Settling in, feeling the push going forwards. So we did this earlier between hips and feet primarily. Realizing that our weight can carry with it a vibrant energy. And that vibrant energy can be really useful. Here, it's propelling us from one foot to another. This is a key element in our general mobility. But it has to be intentional, it has to be guided, because if my weight were to move this way, then I'd fall over. So awareness, intention, very much a feature here as always in Tai Chi. We need to have the correct kind of structure. Here, it's going to be very difficult to really guide the weight. So I'm going to have my feet in the correct position. I don't want to be leaning forwards or tilting over, because again, that will send my center of gravity off in directions that I don't want it to go in, where it's likely to pull me in. When you go forwards, push your back knee forward so your heel comes up, more of your weight settling into your front leg. And when you go back, you raise the toes, more of the weight there. We're looking to align our upper body fully over one leg. And as we get close to that, we find the possibility of just taking a slow step in, and then you push the foot back, put the ball and the foot down, lower the heel, press in, plant the foot, and then move the weight. When you step forwards, again, heel, toes, and then plant the foot. So you're stepping on thin ice, and each time you take the step, you're trying to test the ice. It can be very interesting to do this, say, with your hand on a wall. That can help us to work creatively with those moments when we wobble around. Can we come back to this alignment and this root? Called the combination central equilibrium. Zhongding is the Chinese term. Good. And then with your other foot forwards. And then easing forwards and backwards. Raising your toes and your heel. Always taking time to settle. This is not a race. It is not a competition. And this too has a very restful quality. Seeing how it feels to settle. It's often something that is very elusive, in the busyness of our lives, in all sorts of ways. We can sometimes find ourselves yearning for a bit of space, a bit of peace, a bit of stillness. In these exercises, we find out how we can achieve that through this awareness of our body. Stepping in. This can enable doing something quite difficult, like, for instance, taking a slow step. It's not an easy thing to do. And then we can take a few steps through, either forwards or backwards. Planting the foot carefully, in a way that you might be careful about where you planted something in your garden. Going back. So we're stable in our supporting leg, or the degree to which we're stable It's really influential on the degree to which we can have that awareness of where we want to plant the foot. Let's shake out. Now, have your right foot forwards, mirror my movements. Rest your weight in your back foot, turn to your right towards the front foot. Let that swing your arms out, body expanding, going forwards, the body contracts, arms dropping down, and as you settle in the front foot, you turn to your left and expand again. This is a movement called wind blows the windows. Remember, there are small changes within your body that build up into the bigger movements, like the bricks of a wall build up into the wall. Small changes that we can begin to influence through mind. And then change over. Right foot, left foot forwards, a big pardon, weight back in your right foot, turn into your right, expanding and so as they start to come together, all of these different elements produce quite expressive, often quite complex movements. The components of those movements can be quite simple. Again, we can combine this with the step in that we did. So again, whether you go forwards or backwards depends on where you have the space. I'm going to go forwards. My back foot comes in, and then I plant it forwards. This is dragonfly skims the water. And you may find that you're able to just bring the foot in and then raise your knee. Hips are dropping back. Almost as though for a moment you're able to just hover there in the way that a dragonfly hovers. Change direction if you haven't done so already. Be careful, but if you do feel that little bit of a wobble, maybe you can just again allow hips to drop, regain that stability. It's a useful process. So don't think of it as a failure if you do have a few wobbles. Think of it as an opportunity to work out how you can find that sense of center, root, the stability that comes with it. And then just bring your feet out. Now return to your chair. So the last exercise really reinforces that last point that Tai Chi, it would be nice to think that we were always centered and calm and still, always had that stillness, could always move very fluidly, great stability. But again, you know, life knocks us around a bit, doesn't it? And disrupts that. But in Tai Chi, that returning process is so important. Letting your hands drop down. It's called Embrace Tiger, return to the mountain. Pushing your arms out and then wrapping them around as though you're holding a ball against your chest, embracing the tiger, coming back. This image of the mountain can represent a lot of these qualities, but it Might use another image. The tiger can represent just everyday life, really. So use this exercise at the end here to just reinforce your awareness of what brings you back. You might want to just identify a couple of things, the image of the mountain, perhaps, pull of gravity on your hips or your shoulders, some other sensation in your body or some other image that would be useful to you. Next time you're, well, the example I often give to people is when we're standing in the supermarket. It's a long queue. You're short of time. How do you come back to that sense of stillness? How do you regain that? One more time. And open your eyes. Thank you very much for joining in, everybody. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions. And just enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.